Welcome to the CardinalConnect.com podcast network, your #1 source for Louisville Cardinal athletics. Now, here is your host, Rick Coffey.
Hello and welcome to Cardinal Connect TV, the weekly webcast we've got here at the CardinalConnect.com. I'm your host, Rick Coffey, joined here in studio as always by JD Coffey. Today is September the 8th. This is our 4th episode. A lot of things we're going to get to. First thing first, we'll get to briefly recapping the Murray State win, a 66-21 win, a blowout win, something we expected to happen. Yeah. A lot of other things to get to. They're going to have their first road game in the ACC on Saturdays. They head to Charlottesville, Virginia to take on 1-1 the Virginia Cavaliers. Also, I wouldn't say it's quarterback controversy, but there's quarterback conversation going on after that game on Saturday. We'll get to that. And also, last but certainly not least, was the big news that happened late last week, which the news has broke since we had our last episode here. The big recruiting news is Antonio Blakeney, a 5-star shooting guard, has committed to Rick Pitino and his program. A lot of things to get to. First thing first, I'll just go ahead and say everything I expected happened with that game against Murray State. I don't like FCS games. There's very little you can take of it. You and I are sitting here kind of crunching numbers, figuring out what we're going to take from that game, and sure enough, there's really not much you can. It's so deceiving. Everything you see, you don't know what it's worth.
You almost have to compare minutes played. You know, you look at a guy like James Sample who led the team in tackles last week, and he finished with 1, but how many snaps did he actually play?
Yeah, and that was the biggest thing that I couldn't figure out, because it was very early that you saw the reserves get the action, and that's not surprising by any means, but to be honest with you, I didn't really know what to expect, because Bobby Petrino, first time back in a long time, and the first time he's had a game where it really, not to say it doesn't matter, but you know you're going to win that game regardless of what you really do. And sure enough, they win 66-21. Most of those points, other than the first half touchdown from Murray State, most of the points came against the reserves on defense, and a lot of it was I would say that the backup guys played 85% of that game. And after the game, Coach Petrino talked about how that was the plan going forward, to kind of get those guys some experience and some repetition. And I thought that maybe you'd see a full throttle kind of attack. Maybe you would see the reserves play quite a bit, but it makes sense that he decided not to do that, considering that's an extremely short week. You're lucky that Murray State ended up being at that point in the schedule. When you play on a Monday, then you turn around and play just 5 days later. We could sit here and break down plays and this and that, but to be honest with you, it was tough for me to know who was on the field. Yeah, because numbers you don't recognize, just guys you usually don't see. Yeah,
I applaud them for getting those guys out there. Anybody that's played any sports in their life knows that actual in-game experience is the best growth tool available anyway. So the more these guys can get out on the field, the better they're going to get. So while it might have been a little unorthodox, second game into the season, new coach, new system, some new players, I applaud him for it, because I think it definitely did some guys some good.
No doubt about it. And of course, we're going to give our game balls of the week as we do each side, offense and defense. You could really give it to anybody, right? This is almost where anybody who really had any kind. There was probably, I think, 5 different guys scored touchdowns. Offensively, I got to go with LJ Scott. He was named ACC Rookie of the Week after his big performance, and really made it look easy. He's a guy that we've mentioned quite a few times. He's wise beyond his years. A guy that really, you've heard about how mature he is since he got to campus. A guy who enrolled early, and to be honest with you, had he not already been on campus and enrolled early, a semester early that is, he probably wouldn't be here. This was a guy that when Charlie Strong bolted, he was already here. So I'm sure he could have found a way out, but he decided to stay. The staff loves him, and you wonder sometimes whenever you hear all of the the praise about newcomers, you kind of wonder what level to take that at. Is that they're just happy that they got this guy, or are they that happy to where they're going to play him right away? And LJ Scott, he didn't have much action against Miami, as Dominique Brown was just in a really good rhythm, but he made the most of his opportunity. I realize it is against Murray State, but that's a strong showing. A guy who really was just ready to go. There was the confidence was a word that was used quite a bit after the game from Coach Petrino, and those guys, I think they're confident, and we'll play some video here shortly from the locker room. And when you mention confidence to those guys, it's just because they get so much repetition. They're prepared. They expect to have the success they do. And of course, LJ Scott had a lot of success on Saturday. All the running backs did, really. All the ones who played. Don Brown didn't get a whole lot of carries after really being worn out. in Week 1. So I got to go L.J. Scott, ACC Rookie of the Week. And on the defensive side, I don't know. I mean, I thought about maybe giving it to Charles Gaines just because he had interception, but as you mentioned, didn't even have a tackle.
Not one tackle.
I guess I got to go Keith Kelsey. I don't even know his numbers, but he continues.
He led the team in tackles. That's a good pick.
Continues to really improve. A guy who's really received. I think he was ready last year. He saw a little bit of playing time, but you got to keep in mind there's a lot of guys on that defensive side of the ball last year that were veterans, which is why some of those guys didn't get all the reps. I think Keith Kelsey, as we mentioned last week, also DeAndre Mount, guys who really weren't huge factors last year that are two of the bright spots on defense this year. So I'm going with L.J. Scott, offensive player of the week for me, and on defense I will go Keith Kelsey, the sophomore linebacker. Let's hear it.
I like your L.J. Scott. Anytime a running back averages 11.5 yards per carry, they're doing something right. They're going to get some notoriety. Sure. And just a side note there, Brandon Radcliffe, and I think he showed he could. That guy could probably find a starting job on some teams in the top 25. I'd probably love to have him. But anyway, offense, I think I'm going to go with Mr. Reliable because he is that. He's Mr. Reliable.
Absolutely.
Eli Rogers led the team in catches.
And that never surprises you. Never surprises you. That's what he does.
He's the most I don't want to say maybe underappreciated is the wrong word, because I think everyone, especially his teammates, appreciate what he does game in and game out. But he's just not the guy that everyone talks about.
Sure.
And, in a game where, as you said, the backups, the twos and the threes played the majority of the game, he still led the team in receptions, I think, with 5. So I like Eli Rogers there. Defense, like you said, it's a toss-up, really. If you're
give it to anybody.
If you're just looking at numbers, a guy who shows up early and often all the time, James Burgess.
Sure.
He tied for the lead with I think 4 tackles, and he had a sack, or tackle for loss. But just the numbers, again, you can give it to anybody. Keith Kelsey, James Burgess Jr., and somebody else all had 4 tackles to lead the team. So defense, that's a tough one. I could almost give it to everybody out there because they all did great. Everybody
got involved, it seemed like, on both sides of the ball. You mentioned Eli Rogers, and I think, to elaborate a little bit on, I think you're right, and he's not mentioned quite a bit, but he's been one of the most consistent receivers in this program since he's got here.
As long as I can remember, even before him, what he does for this team, it's something that
you just expect it.
You just do.
And I think that a lot of it has to do with because he's there for the plays when you need him, but it's never a big play. I mean, he's had some touchdowns, a lot. He gets a lot of catches on 3rd down, and he really bailed out Teddy Bridgewater a couple times whenever they needed late drives. If you remember the catch he made against Rutgers on the road, that a game that they had to have to get to the Sugar Bowl against Florida. Eli Rogers, we've been calling him Mr. Reliable for years, and I think it's going to continue to show this season. But and we're gonna get to some videos here shortly. But the one real takeaway that I've got to talk about from this game is what really, I'll say this: when you play an FCS opponent, there's very little you take away that gives you conversation, that gives you legitimate breakdown. But whenever you're talking about the quarterbacks in Saturday's game, you have a situation where there's not controversy, there's not nobody's up in arms, but you now can throw Reggie Bonnafon's name at least in the conversation. Bobby Petrino met with the media on Monday and continued to be honest, I thought he took a little bit of a stand in saying that Will Gardner is our starting quarterback. We have a lot of confidence in Will. Jamon Brown took to the podium after him and said basically the same thing. But this staff is confident in Reggie Bonnafon, and you saw on Saturday why they're confident about him. And, like I said, it's not quarterback controversy, but the one thing that I'll just, before we get to talking about how each guy's played and what you get from each of them, it's worth noting that everybody just assumes, well, if Reggie Bonnafon plays well, then that means he's going to be the starter. Will Gardner's going to the bench. I think that Bobby Petrino would like to use both if he can. Right. And, more often than not, I won't be a hypocrite and contradict myself. I've always not been a fan of the 2-quarterback system unless it's Bobby Petrino, because he's a guy that if you've got offensive value to him and you can make plays, which Reggie Bonnafon can, he's going to find a way to mix you in there on certain situations. And I think if he could use both of those guys, it's going to keep the defense guessing on a lot of things. And, it probably won't happen right away, but if he continues to excel, I'll say this, I expect Reggie Bonnafon to play against Virginia. Now, how much, I don't know, but I think he'll see the field just to see where he's at. And he played good on Saturday. I guess I'll leave it before I let you run with this. When you've got the two quarterback situation where we were in maybe 5-6 years ago when we're talking about my buddy Justin Burke and Adam Froman. That's not a quarterback conversation that gets you overly excited, if you will.
Right.
Now you're talking about two guys who've both proven they can play a little bit so far. I shouldn't say the word proven because it was Murray State when you saw Reggie Bonnafon. And then we talked last week, Will Gardner had a really good game against Miami despite a little bit of a shaky start. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. As I mentioned, not controversy because I think Will Gardner is your guy going forward. But to use Bobby Petrino's words, after the game when asked about, you got another quarterback out there that can play, and he said, yeah, we'd like to use both. It worked out pretty good last time we could do it. Obviously, he's talking about the year 2004, I believe, when he had Brian Brom as a freshman and Stephon LaForce as a senior. And maybe we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, throwing that kind of comparison to Reggie Bonnafon and Will Gardner. But if there's one quarterback or one coach who likes to use multiple quarterbacks when he's able to, it's Bobby Petrino.
A lot of people say, and I kind of subscribe to the theory, if you've got two quarterbacks, you have no quarterback.
And I would agree.
But
most of the time.
But here's the deal. He has shown us that he's got a boatload of confidence. He came out there and did, and his numbers were great. He's going to be in the game. He proved and solidified that albeit against Murray State, he's going to get in there and he's going to be a factor. And a lot of people, and remember, he only played 1 year of varsity
as a quarterback.
Dude lined up as a wide receiver plenty of times through his high school career. So who's to say that mastermind offensive Bobby Petrino isn't going to put things together where he has maybe both quarterbacks in at the same time, maybe a wild card type situation, or maybe he just lines up in the slot.
Yeah,
it wouldn't surprise me.
Not at all. If there's one guy that's going to that could get creative with that, I think it's Coach Petrino. But I will say this: as much as the one thing about Reggie Bonnafon that really, floored me is just his poise. And look, as you mentioned, it's Murray State, but he looked confident. Put the perfect pass to Michael Lee Harris for the touchdown as soon as he got in.
If that pass was a hair early or late, it wouldn't even have been close, but it was
right on the perfect. Yeah, and I think that just goes to show you that. And I'll be the first to admit that when I heard all about the praise that Reggie Bonnafon was getting, and I saw a little bit of the open practices, I believe the kid was good, and they really do think he can play. But I wondered if it was something to maybe get Will Gardner motivated, or maybe if it was something just to get Reggie Bonnafon motivated and to say that, hey, we got faith in you, kid. Let's go see how you do. But the kid can actually play. But I will say this: as much as I like Reggie Bonnafon, I think he's a guy that's this year he's gonna play. What kind of factor he is, what role he has, that's yet to be determined. But I think he is going to be in the mix. I still think that fans are a little too jacked about what Reggie Bonnafon did in that game, and they're kind of selling Will Gardner a little bit short. Now, he didn't look great. I thought he was a little shaky again to start the game. And look, I'm ready to throw the numbers and that performance out for a lot of the first string guys because it's hard to really take a lot from that, as we've mentioned multiple times. But I think I just think it's too early to really know what you have in a lot of guys. Now, so far we've seen some good things. We've yet to see enough bad. I mean, if hardly any bad Will Gardner performances to where anybody can really make a decision. So I do want to make that note that I'm still on the Will Gardner train, and I think he's the guy.
He is. You can look at numbers and critique. He was 13 of 22, but you had a couple pass interference penalties. So they're not going to catch those balls likely. So don't just look at the numbers. I just urge people, don't just look at the numbers. Will's the guy. He's going to be the guy throughout the year. He may not be the guy next year. We don't know, but that's way down the road. He's the guy. He'll get us there. Bonnafon, everybody that's excited and pumped for Bonnafon, he's going to see the field. So I think we'll just have just a good mixture. But Bobby's going to win.
Sure.
Okay? And if utilizing both of those guys is what's going to help him win, he's going to do it.
And one thing to kind of close off, we're going to let you hear from both those guys, Reggie Bonnafon and Will Gardner, here in just a minute. But I think the fact that doesn't really help, one thing that doesn't help Will Gardner is that if he does have a shaky performance, you now have, and it's a good thing if you're a fan that, look, if Will Gardner simply isn't getting it done down the road, you think you got a quarterback that maybe could come in and help you a little bit in Reggie Bonnafon. But now that you know that guy's there, think about it. Last year, if there was a substantial drop-off if Teddy Bridgewater wasn't in the game the last 2 or 3 years. But now I think Will Gardner has not, he's not had years of success to where that if he does go down, everybody panics. I just think there's a lot to be determined, but I do think it kind of puts Will in a little bit of a tough spot because, you know, I think Gardner playing, or I'm sorry, Reggie Bonnafon playing as well as he did puts a little pressure on Will Gardner. And I don't know if you're Bob Vitrino, you want to do that. Maybe this gets the best out of Will Gardner, but
I think pressure is a good thing.
Sure,
I really
well,
do. I think you put pressure on somebody, it's going to make them bring out their best.
And something you and I've talked about, I think confidence is a big thing for Will Gardner. And there's times where I do think he's confident, but there's also times where I somewhat wonder how sure of himself that he is. And, you know, if Reggie Bonnafon going out there and playing as well as he did does put anything in the back of Will Gardner's mind, that's an issue in itself. But I'm anxious to see how he goes and performs on the road this weekend at Virginia. And after the game, we caught up with both Reggie Bonnafon and Will Gardner. They talked a little bit about just the game as a whole against Murray State. Obviously, Will Gardner just talked about you know, his teammates for the most part because they're, you know, he didn't play a whole lot. But Reggie Bonnafon talked about his first experience. As you'll see, he had a lot of confidence, and he didn't seem surprised at all that he came out on his debut and had a strong showing.
Pleased with your week 1 to week 2 and where you kind of finished?
There's always room for improvement, but I feel like we did a good job tonight, taking care of the football and just getting guys open and guys playing good. But I felt like we did a good job tonight.
How'd you feel some of the younger guys did tonight?
The younger guys did a great job stepping up. Reggie made a bunch of big plays. LJ made a bunch of big plays. The younger guys did a good job tonight.
How does that make you feel that the depth is there to just help you out throughout? You have that cushion.
Oh yeah, it feels good. I mean, if a guy goes down, another guy can step in and just keep the thing rolling. That's a good. I mean, it's a good feeling having guys like that.
Now you get to go on the road for the first time. How difficult do you think this week will be, and how much will the preparation be a big part of this?
We're going to have to prepare really good for this game, first road game, an ACC environment. So we got to take preparation and just learn this game plan, and it's going to be loud, so we got to adjust to the noise and go out there and just play football.
Coach Pitino said he'd spent a little time last week watching Virginia's defense. Have you taken a look at it all yourself?
No, we haven't taken a look yet. We've just game plan Murray State. We'll watch probably the game tomorrow and then start game planning.
Being the first road ACC game, what kind of a level of excitement do you have right now?
It's going to be fun. It's going to be a loud environment. We just got to go out and just key into the game plan and what we're going to be doing, and just biggest thing is just to focus. Not let the crowd get to you, and just focus on your assignment.
How did your preparation this week change and your comfort level heading into this game change, having that first start last week?
The comfort level, it was good. I mean, getting that first start under your belt, it was good. Getting out there and play again. But the change was real quick. I mean, it was turn around. I think it was 2 days in pads, and then it was walk through, then it was game day. So that was kind of a hard adjustment, just getting back into a new game plan in that short of a period. But it went good.
Coach Pitino mentioned that he thought you were, from week 1 to week 2, you had some confidence about yourself. What do you think about that?
You do, just getting that first start under your belt and then getting out there and being able to go again. And that's the biggest thing, is just having confidence, and then the guys feed off of that, and they'll see that, and the other guys have confidence, and just keeps rolling around the whole offense.
How long do you think the coaching staff thinks you are? How far along in your maturation as a quarterback do you think the coaching staff thinks you are?
You know, honestly, I'm not sure. You know, they keep that between them. They try to not let me know anything like that. So, you know, I think they're impressed. I mean, I'm not sure, but you know, I'm just going to keep working hard.
Reggie, you think you provide a nice change of pace with Will?
It's tough.
You think you provide a nice change of pace with Will? Two different styles of quarterbacks.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. You know, me and Will push each other in practice every day. So, you know, both of us get better every day. We practice. When we get out here in the game, you know, it's all fun.
Reggie Bonnafon and Will Gardner talking about Louisville's 66-21 win over Murray State, a game which we've mentioned multiple times. Really not a lot you could take away from it. A game you expected them to go out there and dominate, which they did. But now they go on their first road trip, and it sets up nicely that it's a road game against a team that was picked to finish last in their division of the ACC. But as JD mentioned to me earlier, I love the fact that that the first two of the first 3 games on the slate are conference games. I don't love playing the week out of conference opponents. I can't wait for this FIU series to be over.
Yes.
Because that's who they've got next after Virginia, I believe. But for the most part, I love that the first game of the season really means a lot. And now they've got a chance to go on the road in week 3 against a conference opponent. I love that they're not kind of, I guess, cutting their teeth on the road at Clemson for their first road game. So it sets up nicely. We're going to get to...
You know, let's not underestimate Virginia. You know, they were picked to finish last, but I think that we can all agree at this point that they're playing above for the level everybody
Absolutely. They are playing much better than anyone expected, really, so far. They're 1-1 with that one loss coming to UCLA. We're going to get to Virginia here in just a minute, but before we do that, 2 games in, you know, we've mentioned that the Murray State game's not, I like to literally just chalk it up and try to forget that it happened. Now, you love to see the replays of the touchdowns and the big plays and things that get you excited as a fan, but what does it really mean against an FCS opponent? Who really knows? I don't think it means much of anything. So we'll really just take a little bit from the Murray State game and also the Miami game, a big game. I think I think down the road, the more I watch that game over and over, the more I look at Miami. I think once they get their quarterback situation ironed out, they're going to be a pretty good team. Now, Louisville beat them when they were at their worst at quarterback, a true freshman, but we're going to give our grades for thus far 2 games into the season, grades for offense, defense, and special teams. I'll go offensively. I've got to give them a B. Not a B minus, not a B plus. I'm going straight B, and it's just because there were some miscues against Miami. They really didn't get a whole lot of, there was rhythm at times, but it was never consistent throughout the game, and that's something that I think for Bobby Pitino, that's key. That's how he's able to put 60 points on people at times, is when his offense gets a rhythm. Now, Don Brown had a rhythm, would seem like the entire game, but I think the fumbles by Will Gardner, that kind of negated a little bit of rhythm, and really they could have done better. And I think Pitino has mentioned that throughout the season, that there's still things, it's just been 2 weeks, but there's still things they can learn from. So I would give them a B. They can get better, but they certainly haven't been bad, especially when you look at how many points they put up. I mean, they had 31 points against Miami, and they probably should have had 38. But of course, one thing that keeps me from giving them the B plus is that one of those touchdowns was special teams from Corbin Lamb, and had they had 38, that would have been a Keith Kelsey play that he made to return the touchdown. So I give them a B. They can get better, but they certainly haven't been bad. Defensively, I'm going to go A minus, because the only reason I'm not giving them a straight up A is because they gave up what looked to be just a huge miscommunication error on their part in that touchdown in Murray State. And other than that, they've really had, I can 2 games in, I can count on one hand with 3 fingers the drives they've had when it's legitimate first-string guys getting solid repetition where they've given up, touchdown drives. They contain Duke Johnson, who I still think is going to be the best running back Louisville faces all season. They did what they had to do against Murray State. I still think that's one you don't really take into consideration. But if I'm judging off the offense they had, I know the quarterback wasn't strong for Miami, but they did a pretty good job of controlling the run. And the biggest thing I take away from defense, I love the intensity. I think they're quicker now. I thought it would be the other way. They
definitely seem faster.
I think I would just have assumed the Charlie Strong style would have been a little bit quicker, just because it seems like he likes to go, he's big on just having guys not really, like a guy like James Burgess, some people may not fit great at linebacker because he's not huge, but I think they're all over the place. I love the intensity from Todd Grantham on the sidelines. That goes without saying. So I know it's just been Miami's the only real test they had, and that's a test they had where the quarterback was a true freshman making his first career start. But I think they've done pretty well. They haven't done anything wrong enough to where I could take away the A that I give them. Special teams got a little bit better. I'm going to go C+. I still don't think the field position's been great. I don't know. Maybe you can answer this. I don't know. Is it literally just are there rules that they've got in their mind when you're returning a punt or fielding a kickoff? How do you know when to say, okay, I'm going to bring this out and when I'm not? Because from one thing I've noticed in both games, they seem, the punt returners and the kick returners almost seem unsure of themselves as soon as they are getting ready to, have to make a decision.
If you've got to step within if you're at the 10-yard line and you got to back up,
let it go.
Let it go. Absolutely. That's the rule.
That's what I would think.
And we're just, frankly, not following it,
yeah.
Really. I don't know if it's just excitement or just early season. I don't know what it is. I really don't, because that's kind of a cardinal rule. Everybody goes by that. We did have 5 touchbacks. But we scored 9. But we scored 9 times. So.
I didn't in the last show we had. I did not give John Wallace enough credit because he's booting him right through the other end of the stadium.
He's a very good kicker. Yeah. He actually is. Bad choice of word. I don't want to say underappreciated, but it keeps coming.
Well, he hasn't really had to do a whole lot this year, because and who knows, he may not if Bobby keeps punching in the end zone. But I agree, he's a really good kicker, and I think last week when I was dogging the special teams, he was one guy that I didn't give credit to that deserved it. But I would give him. I guess I'll give special teams a I'm going to go C+ now. I'll go C+ because I think that, they haven't been that bad, but they definitely could be a lot better. And Bobby Pitino, I'll never forget this. I didn't see it. I was in the press box for week 1, but when I watched the game afterwards, when Kai De La Cruz made kind of a boneheaded play a couple times, he looked at him and said, "Are you trying to lose this game?" Which you don't usually see sarcasm from Bobby, but I guess he wasn't being sarcastic.
I think guys are I think a lot of fans are freaking out thinking, what? Kai has made some mistakes in special teams over his career. I think a lot of people are thinking, what's going on here? Is this really the best guy you have? Clearly he is. Bobby's not going to have the wrong guy out there.
And he's been doing it for a long time. And if you remember, that's how his career started. When he was Kai Dominguez, he was returning punts and kicks, and I think he muffed one of his first plays he ever had, and then sure enough, he changed his name.
I think that's why he changed his name.
Yeah, changed his name. Now he's a completely different player. He actually had the first touchdown of the game on Saturday. But those are my grades. I'm going... defense, what did I say the first time around? Was it B? Straight up B?
Yeah, it was straight up B for offense.
And then I'm going to go straight up A for the defense. And then special teams, I'll go C+.
Okay. We're not far off. I'm going to go B- offense, primarily because we have not generated a consistent passing game.
Sure.
If someone shuts down our rushing attack, what are we going to be able to do?
That's a good point.
But then, I can contradict myself a little bit and say we scored on 9 consecutive possessions against Murray State.
It's pretty strong.
That's insane.
That is.
We are 100% in the red zone. I think 13 of 13, something like that.
Really can't.
That's really strong. You can't. And most of those are touchdowns. I want to say all but 2 are touchdowns. So they're doing a lot of things right. Obviously, the rushing attack is pretty strong. We saw 3 guys dominate, well, mostly 2 guys, but we did really well against Murray State, and then of course you know what Don Brown did against Miami. But we've got to establish a passing attack and a Bobby Pitino offense with the weapons that we have. I'm on the team, in case you didn't know. With the weapons that we have, we should have a stronger passing attack. We really should. So I'm going to go B-, but you could turn that into an A- or an A within a week, really.
Sure.
So we'll find out. I really need to see more out of the passing attack against Virginia. Defense, I'm much more. I'm much pickier when it comes to defense because I'm a defensive-minded football fan. Not enough takeaways, frankly.
Fair enough.
We're just not. With the talent we have, with the style of play we have, it is high risk, high reward. We haven't gotten a lot of the rewards from a takeaway standpoint. I don't know if there was a fumble yesterday.
I don't think there was. There was 2 interceptions against Miami. One came at the very end, and then they had Charles Gaines had his interception. There might have been there might have been a turnover along the way against Murray State, but whenever it was,
there should be more against Murray State.
team. That's true.
I guess that's what I'm saying because
if you look, as you mentioned, the defense really didn't. The second string defense really didn't play very well against the Murray team.
You still had. You had a guy like Devontre Parnell who showed up with I think 4 tackles. He was actually one of the guys that was tied for the lead, so he did well. But you had your starters outside of him. I believe all your starters were in the top 4 or 5 spots for tackles on teams. Just not enough takeaways. Other than that, I really like what I'm seeing out of him. I think I'll go straight B. I could maybe go to a B- because really we should be getting more takeaways.
Sure.
And should Murray State have had 21 points?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Call it what it is. So, special teams, I've got no patience for special teams. I really don't. I'm going to go C- until I see something different.
Did Kenny Carter wear your patience thin for a few years?
Yeah, pretty much. If you call a spade, that's pretty much it. I want to see, okay, why can't we take it house like Corbin Lamb did against Murray State?
Yeah, I was wondering about that all week this week. Would we see one of those kind of touchdowns?
We should have
against Murray. But some of those, I think, as you even mentioned last week on Corbin Lamb's, it takes a little bit of a goof from the defensive side of special teams in order to get some of those house calls, if you will. But I agree with you. I just think it could be a lot better. That's the one unit that it could be a lot better. When you mentioned the offense. You mentioned the passing attack needing to be a little bit more consistent and just make a bigger threat. And I agree. And I think they're going to have their biggest test maybe on Saturday when they go on the road to Virginia. That's a team that they're 1-1 on the year. They're not a team that really, in my opinion, I think you would agree that I don't think a lot of it has to do with what they do. If Louisville goes and executes and handles their business, they're just a better football team. There's no way around that. But I think Virginia, they were giving Brett Hundley, UCLA's quarterback, and by the way, they're 1-1 on the year. Virginia got a win on Saturday against Richmond, a very convincing win, and then also in the season opener, they played top 10, number 7, LSU, and gave them all they wanted at Virginia. A game they probably should have won had they not, I think they made a lot of mistakes down the stretch that really kind of kept them from being able to get just right there to tie it up to get overtime. But they gave them a lot of trouble, and it was their defense. They brought the pass rush. Brett Hundley, a Heisman candidate quarterback for UCLA, was really having some trouble. I'm eager to see how Louisville handles that. Also eager to see if Louisville's offensive line is able to keep the quarterback safe and still be able to deliver like they have in weeks 1 and 2, because I've got to mention, I think that's one unit that has played really well all season. That you don't talk about the offensive line unless you have to, and usually that means they're not doing well. But we'd be foolish to not give them a little tip of the hat, because they played really well this season. So I think that, as I mentioned, Virginia's a team that I've got to give them credit in one regard. They are bringing in more talent recruiting-wise than they have in really ever. Virginia's not known for being a football power, and they're taking their lumps. They weren't picked to finish very high in the ACC this year, but they had a strong showing against UCLA, and because they played an inferior opponent in week 2, I think if you just, right now when you look at these teams, you've got to really just look at week 1 for both of them. Louisville looked really good against Miami, got a pretty convincing 31-13 win. UCLA only beat Virginia by a touchdown a game. I mean, that's a top 10 team, and now who knows. It's worth noting that UCLA had some trouble with Memphis over the weekend, so you never know what to take from it. But as I mentioned, I think the real test here for Louisville is how they go and handle the road atmosphere, and if they just handle their business and execute, which, from what we've gathered, this is a pretty mature veteran team despite having some newcomers in certain spots, especially on the defensive side. If they handle their business, they should win that. They should cover the spread. And when you go on the road, you never know. This is the one thing I'm looking for here is a road game in the ACC is not like going to Memphis. It's not like going to play at Temple. You're going to play in a stadium where these fans care, and they're going to get a little bit rowdy. When's the last time we went on the road in a really tough environment?
Just a real stadium. That's true. Period. Let's be honest. We didn't get a whole lot of that.
I mean, you remember last year the games where they played at Temple in the Eagles Stadium, and there was nobody there. No. You look back to even the Rutgers game 2 years ago when they won at the end and got to the Sugar Bowl. That stadium was not empty, but it really wasn't. The atmosphere wasn't all that crazy.
It was pretty empty. I mean, I remember making comment about how Rutgers fans fell off from when they were chopping wood to now putting 10,000 people in seats.
I'll say this: the last 2 road games that I can remember for Louisville that really just had a significant feel to it, to where you knew they were on the road up against it, but they rallied and won. One game I forgot all about was Nippert last year, the season finale against Cincinnati, the last game at Nippert Stadium before they had the whole makeover. So that was a big game. They rallied from behind and won that one. And also 3 years ago, whenever they played at West Virginia and they won that game, that was a really tough environment. So this is this game won't meet those two. It's not going to be quite to that level. But it's different than, it was snooze fest when they go on the road to these just bunch of nobody teams. And now this year they actually have, I guess what I'm trying to say is, while Virginia may be the bottom of the ACC, it's still going to be a lot better than what you were used to in the previous
They're probably better than anybody Louisville played in the AAC last year. I mean, probably.
It's fair enough. I think, Central Florida, maybe Cincinnati. But yeah, when you look at, I would agree with that, because
they'd at least be comparable.
That's the perfect word. I think they would compare a little bit. But as I mentioned, I really just think this is a game, and not to kind of just push it off like it's going to be a win no matter what Louisville does, but it's worth noting.
Louisville could get beat.
Yeah, it's possible, but
they shouldn't.
They handle their business. They should be just fine. But I got to admit, I watched a lot of that Virginia-UCLA game, and that Virginia defense, they're pretty strong.
I just want to see. Some people think maybe Miami was overrated. Even Miami, some of those people might tell you, maybe we're just not as good as we. ESPN thinks Miami just isn't as good as they thought they were. We know who Murray State is. Let's see them against somebody who now is 2 games in. Of course, one of them was against Richmond. You're not going to see much from that. But we know how they played against UCLA. UCLA is a good team. They had trouble in Memphis. Maybe they overlooked Memphis to the next matchup. I don't know who UCLA has next. But
Memphis, right?
Have you ever been there?
Yeah, it's not fun.
Okay, so I just they are they're stronger than many teams that Louisville faced at this point in the season.
And they're probably stronger than a lot of people even expect. And I'll say this: if I'm Virginia and I play,
they're going to play up.
If I play UCLA and I get that close to getting a win, you're kicking yourself for making the mistakes that you did to lose the game. But you're also sitting there thinking, hey, you know, we just lost to the top 10 team. We should have beat them. We got number 21 coming to town. That's a game we're going to win. Yeah. So I think it's going to be a real, you know, they have some excitement about that program for the first time in a long time. And I really think that it's going to be close early on. I think Bobby Pitino, to use the words he had at the press conference today, we're going to have to play 4 quarters of football, and they had to do that against Miami, obviously. But really, once it got early fourth quarter, they kind of just managed and hung and really kind of, I wouldn't say dominated, but they had the game within hand. They just needed to protect it. On the road, you may not have that, you know, 13-point cushion like you had against Miami. It'll be interesting to see. But one thing, before we get out of here, there's a couple things I want to get into. On Saturday at the game, this literally, it's consumed me because I thought people were, you know, were making this story bigger than it was, or maybe it really wasn't quite as, you know, I guess I'll just put it out there. There's a John Calipari lookalike that goes to, that's a Louisville fan, which I just learned this today. We had something on the CardinalConnect.com about it earlier today, and you know, we ran into some people after the game, and they told us, you know, they asked me, did you see John Calipari at the game? And I'm thinking, what the hell are you talking about? And sure enough, there's a fan that looks just like John Calipari. He doesn't wear red to the games. He wears neutral colors or something because I think he likes to get a rise out of people. Yeah. And if you've been to Papa John's Cardinal Stadium, you're very familiar with the, you know, TV timeouts. The camera goes around and does the kiss cam and just kind of spots fans they see having a good time just to get the overall crowd into it. And for 2 games this year, they've spotlighted this John Calipari lookalike, and the stadium just erupts in boos. And sure enough, his son, the crew at ESPN 680 was talking about it this morning on their show, the Diener Show. And sure enough, within minutes of mentioning this, the lookalike's son tweeted in and sent a picture, and he says, yeah, his dad is getting booed at every game now. And I just think I literally thought, no way, that guy really looks that much like him. And then when you see him, like, oh my God, it looks like he could be John Calipari's twin brother.
See, I'd take it the other direction. If I'm him, I deck out in red and Cardinal gear, and I drive straight to Lexington and walk the streets.
That's what I told
Just make them all trip out.
Oh,
just walk the streets of Lexington in Cardinal gear.
Well, if you see that guy, get his number. I want to have him on the show. We need to have him sit right here, and we could send these webcasts viral and just say John Calipari joining us in studio. How great would it be if he sounded
like him too? That would just top it off.
Just a pompous ass.
Just a d-bag. I mean, you know, whatever.
All right, well, before we get out of here, there's one thing that obviously is very, very important to mention. I know it's football season. They're just 2 games in, going into week 3 here. But basketball recruiting has never been better, and I mean that literally. Louisville now has the #1 ranked recruiting class in the country by Scout.com. We've talked over the last few weeks about the commitments that they do have. Donovan Mitchell, a guy who just exploded onto the circuit this summer, now a 5-star kid. I think he's ranked number 19 in the country. Ding Adele was their first commitment, another 5-star guy. Raymond Spalding, one of the kind of up-and-coming 4-star power forwards from Trinity High School here in Louisville, and then they get their big guy. They land their man. When I say big, I don't mean big as in you know, stature. He's a 6'4" shooting guard. But Antonio Blakeney has been a top target for Rick Pitino and his staff for well over a year now. And you know, we saw him on campus, and you know, I think that, you know, I'm not surprised in any regard that he came to Louisville, and I think that it just goes to show, you know, we're not allowed to actually talk about his visit, and we don't know anything about, you know, how the visit went, but all signs seem to point to it went really well considering he committed just days later. But saying that, you know, he's a guy who is probably, when you look at rankings, you got to throw in Jaquan Lyle last year, who was a high-profile commitment, didn't end up here on campus. So as we've mentioned, it's important to see, you know, once you want to see him sign their letter of intent and get here, as we had already mentioned. But he's one guy who, you know, if he turns out to be the potential star that everybody thinks he is, he along with maybe Donovan Mitchell too, this is the first time you know, Louisville's had highly ranked guys before. Now we're talking about 2 guys who may be in the NBA after a year or 2, and that's just something we're not used to.
And Rick Pitino doesn't generally like to play freshmen, so it'll be interesting to see, because these are the kind of guys that are going to be talented enough that you want to get them on the court.
Sure.
For not only just because they're talented, but these aren't guys that plan on sitting on the bench for their first year, because a lot of programs, they wouldn't sit on the bench. They're going to play right away. So they may be a factor right out of the gate for Louisville.
And also, I think when you look at the guys who are leaving the program, Chris Jones and Montrezl Harrell's going to be gone for sure. Terry Rozier will likely head to the NBA, as we mentioned, if he has that year. But, these guys, not only will they come in and probably be, needed because of the loss of certain people, but they're probably going to walk in and be as talented as a lot of the guys. So I think that's important to mention as well. And Rick Pitino, he's been doing it for a long time. I can't think of a recruiting class as far as following him at Louisville that's ever had this much momentum. As we mentioned, Scout.com now has them as the #1 ranked class in the country, and that may change as some of the top guys haven't made their decisions yet. I understand that, but still, regardless of who's left and where they go, Louisville's going to have a very strong class. They should be no worse than 3 when you look at the fact they've got every one of their players is regarded as a 5-star prospect by one service or another, whether it be Rivals, Scout, or 247 Sports. So a great class for Rick Pitino, and that about does it for us today. Hopefully we're back next week talking about Louisville's first ever road win in the ACC. Hopefully we'll be recapping a win over the Virginia Cavaliers.
Hopefully a beatdown.
That would be nice.
Hopefully a beatdown.
That may be a little boring, but hey, I'll take it.
That's true. That's true. We should hopefully learn more about this team.
I think we will.
And that's really what I'm looking forward to, just learning a little bit more about what we've got.
And we should. That does it for us here at Cardinal Connect TV.